as I said, Jay is a cowboy poet, and he's going to be sharing poetry and informing us with a lot of things about cowboy poetry that we may or may not know. I have a feeling I'm going to be learning a lot. I hope you do too. Jay, let's just kick it off by, why don't you tell us how you got started in doing cowboy poetry?
Well, actually, we're talking like 1996.
I was a baby.
Yeah, not probably.
Or not.
I guess probably the reason that I got to be interested in cowboy poetry was back in the 90s, late 90s, a lot of chuck wagon cook-offs and poetry gatherings kind of were around the country, and we went to a few chuck wagon cook-offs and listened to the poetry and the music, and I am a huge fan of Red Steagall.
Okay, right.
And Red generally would be around, or you'd hear his music or his poetry a lot back in those days, and it just got me interested in the poetry part of the deal, and I had no idea that I could write a poem of any kind, but I loved the stories that Red portrayed in his music and in his poetry, and it just got me interested in trying to see if I could write some poetry. And I grew up in southwest Oklahoma, and I had numerous stories from like my dad and my granddad and a lot of old cowboys that were around in those days, and those stories to me needed to at least be preserved. Whether I could write a poem about it or not, I had no idea, but I just felt like the stories needed to be preserved. Granddad was a brand inspector for the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raiders Association, and so I got to meet a lot of the guys that were involved in that organization, and good men, all good men, and it impressed me what kind of guys they were, and the people that was involved in that organization. And of course, Dad rodeoed and was a cowboy his whole life, and I didn't really have a choice. I kind of had to be.
Right.
So stories from the rodeos and the ropings and the places that we went were, I thought needed to be at least preserved somewhat. And so I thought, well, if I can at least write the stories down, maybe at some point I could put them in the form of a poem. I wasn't sure about that, but I just felt like that you needed to preserve some of those stories. And the old timers, when they told a story, somebody needed to remember that, write it down, whatever it took, because when those old timers are gone, then the stories are gone.
Right.
And now that I am an old timer, I'm trying to preserve some of those stories that I heard in my earlier years.
Right. Well, what if we just kick this off with you sharing one of those that it's one of your favorites or something maybe, and just tell us a story in the poetry form.
Okay. Well,
all right?
You know, sometimes, Edie, the stories or the inspiration for the poem is more entertaining than the poem is. So keep that in mind. But this particular poem was one of the first poems that I wrote back in the early days, and it came from a story from my dad and my granddad, and it actually happened right over here southwest a little ways at Walters, Oklahoma. And this was my dad and my granddad both knew this fella. His name was Lum Barber, and if you're from around this part of the area, probably you knew him or had heard of Lum Barber. Back in the early days, and this is about 1948 to 50, Lum always loved the rodeo, and he loved the bull riding in particular. So he would perch up on the fence right by the bucking chutes at the Walters Rodeo Arena and watch the bull riding. And in those days, this is kind of before they tore the old rodeo grounds down and built a new one. That fence arena fence was built out of cross-tie posts, and on the inside was bull wire, and through the top of those cross-tie posts they had drilled a hole and put a little 1/4-inch cable through the top of those posts, and Lum would perch up on that cable and watch the bull riding. And so this particular story came from that.
Okay.
And I used what we call poetic license a little bit,
Right.
which in reality is just, it gives you the opportunity to lie like the devil if you want to.
All
So-
for the sake of entertainment, I'm sure.
Yes. Yes.
All right, well, I'm going to step out and let you
Okay.
get going on that.
Thanks. He ain't much on conversation. His old mind, it wanders some. But a better compadre ain't lived or breathed than my old amigo Lum. Now Lum, he's plenty punchy. You won't find a tougher old coot, but downright plain old common sense ain't one of his stronger suits. You won't find a better feller to have around you in a pinch. His head's as hard as granite rock, and he won't give an inch. We were cowboying up in the Keachai Hills. It was one of our lighter days, but we'd about had our belly full of cutting them cedar stays. And the weekend now was coming up, time for the big rodeo in town. It'd been quite a spell since we'd been in, so Lum and me, we rode on down. Now Lum sure ain't no spring chicken, but he acts just like a kid when the bull riders finally mount the beast. He used to twist 'em himself, he did. And the crowd gathers round the bucking chutes. They're always thick as biting fleas, and Lum, his stature's lacking some, making it tough for him to see. Well, Lum sure ain't no genius, but what next he did made sense. He climbed up near the bucking chutes and sat upon the fence. Well, this old fence ain't near as comfy as his old rocker back at the shack, and the cable strung through them cross-tie posts seemed to be a little slack. Now Lum, he's kind of portly, of a diet he ain't thought, so the cable strand he set upon down the line had been drawn taut. And the announcer's voice boomed loudly of this high-horned brindle beast. 2,000 pounds of raging hell was soon to be released. And on Widowmaker, they kicked the latch, and he followed the gate around. He planted his feet and sucked her back left, and slammed that cowboy down. Well, he give the clown a hooking, made a lap around the pen, but, well, they ain't a fence in 100 miles could hold this brindle in. And old Widowmaker, he sized her up, then made a fitful run. He was intent on clearing that fence just 4 posts down from Lum. Well, he quit the earth in one great leap, but now comes the change of events. A solid ton of snorting beef hits smack on top of that fence. No Lum, he's cool, just sat there calm with both hands in his pockets, but a ton of bull on that cable strand shot Lum off like a rocket. Well, Lum survived the launching and annihilation merely by chance, but well, he didn't make re-entry till about halfway through the dance. And Lum told me it wasn't the launch, nor the falling, nor the drop. The thing that hurt his old body so was that mighty sudden stop. Now Lum believes the moral here needs telling to all you fans. It's best to watch the rodeo from way up in the stands. True story. Well, partly true.
Yeah, partly true.
Partly
true. All right, that was really good.
Thank you.
That was good.
Appreciate
So, while you were reciting that, I guess that's the proper word for that. I was thinking about the meter, the beat. You have a certain meter that you are trying to put that to. Kind of tell us about that creative process.
Traditionally, cowboy poetry is rhymed and metered poetry. It has a certain rhyme scheme, a certain meter that goes with it, so it actually sings a little bit better than just telling a story. It's easier to remember if you can write it in rhymed and metered way.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's a lot of the reason that early cowboy poetry was written in a rhymed and metered way is because it makes it easier to remember.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like remembering a song than it is just a story. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and for me, traditional cowboy is a kind of poetry, and I try hard to write poetry in a rhymed and metered way,
Mm-hmm.
to try to stay with the traditions of early cowboy poetry.
So it's always the same beat and the same rhyme.
Not necessarily the same beat or the same rhyme scheme. You can change it up and have the words that rhyme at the end of a line can be somewhere embedded in that verse itself. You can change the rhyme and the meter up somewhat, and it still has a distinctive meter and a distinctive rhyme scheme.
Right. Okay. But it does kind of it kind of pulls the listener in. I think that kind of, it's almost like a melody, you know,
I
the
think
way
you're right.
the way it, and so it kind, I don't know, it pulls you into it, or at least it does me.
And a lot of the old cowboy songs that were written way back in the day, even today, they start out with a poem in mind. They take a poem, some of them take a poem and put music with the poem and turn it into a song. So it's kind of works hand in hand.
Right. So a minute ago you mentioned the early days of cowboy poetry. Would you say that it dates back to maybe the Chisholm Trail?
Absolutely.
Get how I threw that in, the Chisholm Trail?
Absolutely.
Chisholm Trail Heritage Center, yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell us the history of
Well,
that.
let's see, was it this is
Well, the Chisholm Trails, it was
150?
150 in 2017.
2017.
So it's, yeah, 153 years old now. 1867
Right.
was when it was first used.
A lot of poetry was written along those trails. And part of the reason I think they started writing poetry, songs, stories, it's more oral history than anything, but those cowboys along the trail, there might be 10, 12, 15 of them moving a herd that's 2,500, 3,000 head strong. And they learned early on that if those cattle had familiar sounds when they bedded down at night, that it helped keep those herds calm to a point that they wouldn't stampede. Now, that's not to say they wouldn't, because any other strange sound or lightning, thunder, coyotes, whatever, might put them into a run. But they knew on night guard, if they were singing or if they were reciting poetry or telling stories around that herd, it had a calming effect on those cattle. And so a lot of cowboy poetry was written along those trails, the Chisholm Trail or the Western Trail, the two predominant trails that come through the state of Oklahoma, which at that time was Indian territory.
Right.
So there was it's more oral history than it is anything, but it did have an effect on the cattle.
On the cattle. So I guess if you wanted to try your hand at telling a poem or singing, you might be able to decide which one would start a stampede and which one wouldn't. Like if I decided to sing, a stampede would ensue, definitely. So I'd be having to stick with poetry like you're doing, for sure. Do you happen to know any of the old, like an old
I do.
poem?
There's a book called The Trail Drivers of Texas, and it's right here at the museum. They have it in the gift shop up there.
I'll tell you how you can buy it before we leave today.
Good idea.
Okay.
But if you want to know about cattle drives in those early days, The Trail Drivers of Texas is a wonderful book, because it's memoirs that were written by the old drovers that pushed cattle up the trail. All those old drovers were asked to send their letters or memoirs along the trail into an organization. They were going to compile all those stories into a book, sell the book, and then put a statue up at the Texas Trail Drivers Museum in San Antonio. So they did that. And it's fascinating, some of the stories that you hear from those guys that actually push cattle up the trail.
Mm-hmm.
And I read through the majority of that book. It's only about 1,000 pages long, so takes me a long time to get through there. But I did find a poem in that book written by a man by the name of Luther A. Lahon. And he turned out to be the secretary of the Old Trail Drivers Association. And he actually drove cattle up the trail. But as the trail ended and those guys got older, well, they look back on the memories of their trail driving days. And when I first found the poem, I thought, well, I'll get to listen or read about stampedes and all the dangers along the trail. And dangers was the opportune word.
Right.
It was dangerous. But as I got into the poem, it wasn't about the dangers of the trail. It was about the friendships that those men forged in that short 20-year period of time, how they felt about the camaraderie of those early days along the trail. And so it wasn't about the dangers, it was about the friendships that they made in those days. And
well, isn't that how life is?
Absolutely.
You have these good times and bad times, but it's the people that
Absolutely.
you're connected with those are the things that stay with you more so than those events
Absolutely.
that drop in along the way.
Absolutely.
Well, share this poem with us. This is about a snapshot of history.
Yeah.
So you guys sit back and enjoy.
This was written by Luther A. Lahon, and it's called The Good Old Cowboy Days. My fancy drifts as often through the murky, misty maze of the past, of the seasons, to the good old cowboy days. When the grass was green and waving and the skies was soft and blue and the men was brave and loyal, the women fair and true. The old-time cowboy, here's to him, from the hired hand to the boss. His soul was free from envy and his heart was free from dross. And deep within his nature, which was rugged, high, and bold, there ran a vein of metal, and the metal, men, was gold. While he'd stand up drunk or sober, again 1,000 for his rights, he'd sometimes close an argument by shooting out the lights. And if there was a killing by the quickest on the draw, he weren't disposed to quibble about the majesty of law. But a thief, a low-down villain, why, he had no use for him, was mighty apt to leave him dangling from a handy limb. He was heeled and always ready, quick with pistol or with knife, but he never shirked a danger, a duty in his life. And at a tale of sorrow or of innocence beguiled, his heart was just as tender as the heart of any child. And woman, her honor was a sacred thing, and hence he threw his arms around her in a figurative sense. His home was yours where it was, and open stood the door whose hinges never closed upon the needy or the poor. High or low, it mattered not the time, if night or day. The stranger found a welcome just as long as he would stay. He was honest to the marrow, and his bond was in his word. He paid for every critter that he cut into his herd. And take your note, because he loaned a friend a little pelf? No, sir, indeed, he thought you was as worthy as himself. And when you came and paid it back as proper was and meet, you trod upon forbidden ground to ask for receipt. In former case, you paid the debt, there weren't no interest due, and in the latter, chances are he had put a hole through you. The old-time cowboy had his faults, 'tis true as has been said. He'd look upon the liquor when the liquor men was red. And his language weren't always spoke according to the rule, nor was it such as you'd expect to hear in Sunday school. But when he went to meeting men, he'd never yawn nor doze, nor sat there taking notice of the congregation's close. He listened to the preacher with respect and all of that. He never failed Annie when they passed around the hat. I called to mind the tournament, and then the ball at night of how old Porter drawed the bow and sawed with all his might. And how they danced, the boys and girls, and how that one was there with rosy cheeks and hazel eyes and golden curly hair. Oh, but now I'm touching on a mighty tender spot. That boyhood love at this late date had better be forgot. Still my memory takes me back again and fondly strays amidst those dear remembered scenes, the good old cowboy days. The old-time cowboy was a man all over, do you hear me, men? I somehow kind of figure we'll not see his like again. The few that's left are older now, their hair is mostly white, their forms are not so active and their eyes are not so bright. As when the grass was waving green, the skies was soft and blue, and the men was brave and loyal, the women fair and true. And the land was filled with plenty, and the range was free to graze, and we all rode as brothers in the good old cowboy days. Luther A. Lahan, 1903.
Wow.
Thank you. Isn't that a neat poem?
That was a really great poem. Yes, it is. I mean, I don't think about it as being a poem. It's like I'm listening to the story. I'm listening to you tell a story.
And that's the key. You really, for me, I don't really want to know where the rhyme scheme and the meter is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the story. The rhyme scheme and the meter is going to be in there, irregardless.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the story that captures me, and I want to hear the story.
Right.
And hopefully I can, if I do a good enough job, I can put the rhyme and the meter in there, and everything works out good.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if you guys heard or not, but we have a little peanut gallery here with us today. We're so glad you guys are all here. Everybody wave, say hi to the camera. That's really nice. I think it's probably good for Jay to have some little feedback like that.
They're all bandits.
They all are. Yeah, everyone's got their mask on. So how long does it take you to learn? And because I memorize things too, and it takes a little while for it to come out natural and not sound like you've just memorized it. So how long would you say that takes for you?
It takes a good long time, for me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I may read that poem or recite that poem by looking at it 1,000 times
Mm-hmm.
before I finally get to the point that it's kind of like a song. You just remember the words.
Right.
It's ingrained in your memory, but it takes me that long to get it memorized to the point that I'm 110% comfortable with reciting that poem without messing it up.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that point, for me anyway, when I get to that point, that's about the time that I can start putting the passion in that poem
Mm-hmm.
that the author intended to be in there.
Right.
But the passion, it's hard to bring it out until you get those lines in there where you don't even have to think about them; they just come out.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you practice out loud?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Not with a crowd.
Right.
But
Right. Yeah, I practice things that I'm memorizing. I practice them out loud too. It's just something about hearing it.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I can have it in my head and I can recite it in my head easily, but just as soon as you start doing it out loud, then your mind goes somewhere else, and and sometimes it's just hard to get it down like you would reciting it in your head. When you start reciting it live, then it changes things up. And so yeah, I would advise, if you're going to memorize, get it to the point that you've got it down pretty good, but start reciting that poem out loud.
Out loud, yeah.
And
That's really good advice. So do you find it a little more difficult to do someone else's works, someone else's poems, than something you've written yourself?
You know, sometimes for me, it's easier for me to recite someone else's poem, a classic, than it is for me to recite my own. And I don't know why that is, but maybe I spend more time with those classic poems that I do than I do my own. I just, seems like I can get through somebody else's stuff easier than I can my own.
So how many would you say you've written?
Oh, I'm going to say probably 75, 80 poems.
You compiled them in a book for us?
Oh, I've got a little book out that's got about 10 or 12 poems in it of mine, and then a friend of mine in South Dakota, we went together and put this little book together. So we've got 10 or 12 poems each in the book, and I've been asked to do that, and I just haven't.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
I haven't taken the time. It takes time to get it all compiled, and
Right.
I got them all on the computer.
Step one.
I don't have them up here yet, all of them. But,
Right.
But at some point, yeah, I'd like to do that.
Well, how about if you share one of those originals with us?
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Here we go. Jay Snider.
You know, sometimes, we talked about this earlier, sometimes the inspiration for the poem or the story behind the poem is more entertaining than the poem itself. This particular poem, I'm not sure where it came from, but it's a poem that I wrote, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago probably. The very first rap poem that I ever wrote. Well, it's not really a rap poem. It just sounds like it is. It's called Tyrone and Tyree. I learned lots of lessons about cowboying up. You see, I've been a cowboy since I was a pup, and well, my dad taught me the way Granddad taught him. Rewards without effort come seldom and slim. That if working for wages or bossing a crew, a job left half finished reflects upon you. That good leaders are men who, while bossing a crew, won't ask of their men what they wouldn't do, because, well, men are just men, and it's by God's design we all pull on our britches one leg at a time. But some men are leaders while others pull back. They'll stray from the trail some or hard to untrack. But with proper persuasion, they'll likely fall in. You see, that's just the nature of horses and men. And that put me to thinking about Tyrone and Tyree, the best team of Belgians you ever would see. While they'd lay in those collars and pull stride for stride, work sun up to sundown till the day that they died. But Tyree would get balky, not pull like he should, so Tyrone would reach over and scold him right good. And the load they was pulling would even right out. That's the lesson in life that I'm talking about. Because some horses are leaders while others pull back. They'll stray from the trail some or hard to untrack. But with proper persuasion, they'll likely fall in. You see, that's just the nature of horses and men. And that put me to thinking about what Dad had said, and one question he asked me still rings in my head. In your mirror while shaving, which one would you see? Would you see Tyrone or would you see Tyree? And to leaders of men, let's all raise a cup. Here's to pulling your weight, to cowboying up. Tyrone and Tyree.
I like that one. That one's got a good lesson. I think every parent would probably like to have that one written down somewhere. Do a little teaching with it.
Well, I got it. I'll send it to you.
Okay. I'm out of that parenting business. Mine are all grown. Well, I wish.
You are?
I'll just go on to the next thing.
There you go.
Okay, so you've kind of told us about the whole that the history and how it started out on the cattle trails, and how it's a historical record, really, these poems, and kind of your your inspiration, your reason for writing these, I think is to just keep that history going. Now, when you go to like cowboy poetry events, are they competitions, or are they just like an entertaining type event? What are those like?
Most of those gatherings are just entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
There are some competitions, and have been some competitions in the past. One in particular is called the Cowboy Poetry Rodeo that they used to have in Kanab, Utah.
Uh-huh.
And they moved it a time or two, but it ended up in Abilene, Kansas now.
Oh.
And it's a competition for poets or aspiring poets that want to come enter the competition, and they bring their own works, or they can recite works of somebody else's. There's a competition for classic poetry and humorous poetry, and so there's still a competition
Mm-hmm.
going. It's the only one really that I know of that's going right now is in Abilene. Most of the gatherings that I go to or have been to, now I've been to Kanab a couple of times,
Uh-huh.
but most of the gatherings I go to now are just entertainment purposes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have them all over the country now. There's a lot of them that's, got canceled this year because of things that's going on right now.
Right.
But
I was wondering, like, typically, how many of these events would you attend in a year?
I'm gonna say the gatherings themselves, probably 12, 15 gatherings, and then some private parties or whatever that I go to. But
So
I'm gonna say
you've
50.
missed out on several months then of these. Or have they canceled into the future too, into the future months already?
They have. They've canceled. I just got word the other day that they canceled Elko, Nevada, which is the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering, which has been going on since 1985.
Oh, wow. That's really unfortunate.
And I went last year. It's
Uh-huh.
always in January, 1st of February. I went last year, and we got word the other day that they were going to cancel it for the coming year.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to go to in August. Winsboro, Texas, they canceled that one. Abilene, Texas, Western Heritage Classic, back in Mother's Day weekend, they canceled that. So there's been a lot of them that have been canceled.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that's been so enjoyable about this is that we have been able to give people, artists like you, an opportunity to share your talents when you haven't had a place to go
Right.
like you normally would. And so that's one of the things I really love about this. So share another one with us.
Okay.
Jay,
All right.
I bet you got a bunch.
Well, I got one here that took a little doing,
Okay.
but this was I wrote this poem 10, 12 years ago. The inspiration for the poem came from a spring gathering, spring works that my older brother and I and our two youngest sons went to. A fellow by the name of Tom Morehouse, which the Morehouse family had been ranching in North Texas for well over 100 years. And Tom invited us to come down to the spring works. So we drove down there and got to the camp way before daylight. Well, the cowboys had already roped their horses out, saddled, and left to go gather the cattle. So we get to camp, and there's only one person left in camp, and that's the cook. And he didn't talk exactly like we did. We thought maybe he was an exchange student or something. So he through some sign language and a little bit of Spanish that we knew,
Right.
he directed us to the pasture they were going to gather that morning. So we rode over that way, and we got just breaking light, and we got to the rim up there, and we could see a silhouette of a cowboy on the rim. So we rode over there and got to visiting with him, and he didn't talk like us either. So I quizzed him a little bit about where he was from. He's a young guy, probably 17, 18 years old. And he said, I'm from Wisconsin. And I said, what in the world are you doing in North Texas from Wisconsin? He said, well, I always wanted to work on a real cattle ranch. He said, I've been in Wisconsin and I've been wrangling dudes at a dude ranch for a few years. And he said, but I always wanted to work on a real cattle ranch. So he got a hold of Tom Morehouse. And Tom, being Tom, the kind of guy he is, he said, if you can get here before the wagon rolls out, I'll put you to work. Well, this kid jumped in his pickup, I guess, and drove day and night, got there before the wagon rolled out. And so he had been there a few days by the time we got there. But anyway, when we got that pasture gathered that morning, got him back to the pens, everybody went to work, working the calves and branding, dehorning, castrating, everything that goes with the spring works. And this kid had more try probably than any kid I'd seen in a long time. Mm-hmm. He knew absolutely nothing about cattle, but he had a lot of try. And I was impressed that Tom would even give him a chance.
Right.
But Tom is one of those kind of guys that thinks we've got to let these young guys learn. Right. So he gave him a chance. So as the day went along, it got a little tougher on this kid as the day went on. And anyway, when it was all said and done, I went home and I wanted to write a poem in tribute to Tom Morehouse for giving this boy a chance. And I wanted it to be real inspirational. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes when you start writing, you might be headed to Phoenix and you got to go to Shreveport to get there, so things change up. Anyway, right. It took me a couple of years to write it. Uh-huh. So I should have a book out in about 30 years.
Well, okay, yeah. Well, fortunately, we can hear the poem a lot quicker than that. Thank you.
This is called a tribute to Tom. Nobody knew where the kid called home. He just wandered in one day. He begged and pleaded with the wagon boss. He said he'd darn sure earn his pay. We could see he weren't a cowboy by the way he spoke and dressed, but something about him sort of struck a note. He was different from the rest. And we could tell that Tom was worried because the kid was darn sure green, but he had a kind of sincere way that we'd seldom ever seen. So we convinced old Tom to hire him on. He said he'd make the kid a place. Well, you could have lit the darkest room with the light in that kid's face. So Tom cuts him out a seasoned horse so's to keep the kid alive. By break of dawn that frosty morn, the kid was making his first drive. And Tom sent him on a circle, said to ride the canyon rim, but by the time the kid made the branding pins, his old horse was a-leading him. But he'd wade right in, I'll give him that, be it luck or be it fate, because every time we'd cut a dry, he'd be a-standing in the gate. But at the branding fire, he seemed compelled to sure enough make a hand, so we stuck him on the flanking crew so's to really test his sand. Well, the first calf run him over, kicked the pocket off his shirt. By the time he got him flanked and held, his boots was full of dirt. And Tom had yelled to bring the iron. The kid was Johnny on the spot. The end he grabbed was cold as ice. The end he handed Tom was not. But what the heck, the kid's got spunk. He healed old Nasty's calf and drug him through the branding fire, prompting me and Tom to laugh. Till old Nasty come a-hunting for the thief what stole her kin. She give old Tom a hook and launched him up and out the pen. So Tom commenced to school the lad on vaccinating calves, but now old Tom will be bangs free and the blackleg he won't have. So we put the kid to cropping ears, but it give the boy the heaves, and in between convulsions he swaller forked Tom's sleeve. Now the boys agree he'll make a hand on that, I'll bet my life, but we figured till he's seasoned some, why, we'd not give the lad the knife. Then my head began to reel and swelling up with cowboy pride, because the kid's success ain't relevant. It's just simply that he tried. But facts is facts, and I'm proud to say we kept the boy alive, but had we had to school him twice, well, poor old Tom might not survive. Another true story. Thank you.
Oh, that's a good one. And Mom and Dad, if y'all are watching, that probably is making you think about Kevin the first time my husband showed up to help Mom and Dad work the cattle. Yeah, that was a good one.
Sometimes it can be a wreck.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, Baxter Black says that cowboy poetry it's all written about wrecks. That's all it's written about.
Well, it does make for a colorful tale, that's for sure.
It does.
That is for sure. Well, Jay, you've told us so many really great things about this art form. It really is. It is an art form. It's as, I don't know, endearing to me as the Western art, the paintings, the sculptures, all those things that we have here in our gallery.
Absolutely.
This cowboy poetry is just as important, I think, as all of that.
Well, I think it is. I think it's important, because we need to keep this history alive. If we don't keep it alive, we can lose this whole genre in one generation.
Right.
So we got to be careful to pass that history along to the generations below us, and I try to do that some with my grandkids, and we still try to do some things the old way, and they need to know, that this is what our history in this part of the country is all about.
Exactly.
Is the cattle industry.
Right. So, do you see a lot of the younger cowboys aspiring to be cowboy poets, where you can feel comfortable that someone else is going to take that mantle and go with it?
There are a few. Met several young guys that are coming up in the ranks that are really doing a great job. I just wished we could see more.
Right.
Because there's a whole bunch of us that's getting a little longer in the tooth, and so we need to. But I think we're still trying to pass that along, and those guys, the young guys that are coming up now, are passing it on to their friends, and their friends are passing it to their friends, and so I think we got some good ones coming up. So I feel pretty confident that we'll keep it going.
Good. I would hate to see this not come back and join, be a part of life,
Right.
be a part of the celebration of this, like you say, the Western life that we had here. This might be a good time just to stop and maybe take some questions. You guys can unmute your microphone and ask a question, or you can type something up in the chat box. I see there are a few things. Okay, looked like there was a few glitches here. It looks like Ron Wilson said that you've been a judge at the National Cowboy Poetry Rodeo, and the Kansas Cowboy Poetry Contest is going virtual.
Oh, really?
That's what
Awesome.
what Ron Wilson says. Yeah. Are
This
you
is,
there, Mr.
Ron
Wilson?
Wilson in Kansas. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Ron.
Howdy, Jay.
How are you?
Mighty fine, and you did an outstanding job.
Well, thank you, sir.
I really enjoyed what you've done here today, and really thankful that the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center is doing this. The Kansas Cowboy Poetry Contest, we had to cancel our live events because of the pandemic, but we're doing a virtual contest this year, so if us cowboys can figure out how to get on the computer, we're gonna.
Right. You might depend on some of those younger cowboys to help with that.
There you Yeah, well, I hate to hear that, Ron, but it just kind of is what it is, and you guys are going to carry on, and if you got to do it virtual, so be it. Let's do it.
Right. Okay, anybody else have any comments or questions for Jay? Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. We sure appreciate your comments. Nobody else? Well, how about if you kind of end this for us with one of your poems?
Okay.
And then I'll come back on here and we'll tell everybody bye after you finish
Okay.
up. All right, one more from Jay Snider.
I wrote this poem, I don't know, 5-6 years ago maybe. In 1973, a couple by the name of Lee and Leela Carr put out a book called Rope Burns, and it's a compilation of pictures, stories. Everybody that was in the roping industry in those years is in that book. From world's champions to ranch cowboys to jerk down steer roping guys, everybody that was a roper in those days pretty much is in that book. And by the way, if you find that book, let me know, because we're always in search of another one, because they're out of print. You can't hardly find them. They're really a neat book. But back there towards the back, lower right-hand corner of that page, picture of my dad in there. And the picture, he's sitting on an old red roan 16-ton bred horse that we had for a long time. And that horse, I remember him well. I would rather walk and lead him down the road as to ride him. But if you needed to go to the pasture and rope a big one or a wild one, he'd be the one you'd take. So the caption below the picture says, he always rode good horses. And that's about the extent of it. So I wanted to write something kind of in that context. So I came up with this poem, and a friend of mine from down in Ocala, Texas, put music to the poem, and it was on, her and her husband Gary put it on their latest album, Satisfied Hearts or something. Anyway, this is called He Always Rode Good Horses. He always rode good horses. From my memory as a kid, I aspired to have my horses work just the way his horses did. But my youthful lack of patience left me standing in the road. That same old lack of patience in my horses plainly showed. So I sat down at the drawing board he had built throughout the years. His words, though not abrasive, only reinforced my fears. It's gentle hands that make good horses, son, not fight, nor fear, nor dread. Good men will ride good horses, are the words he often said. He said, trust ain't freely given, it's elusive, slowly earned. A man's a mirror image of the things his horses learned. And with trust, respect soon follows like a wobbly-legged foal, and both are most important if good horses as you go. He said if he rebels from disrespect, he's trying hard to say, let me spur you in the shoulder, see how long you'll stay. But given half a chance, he'll rise up to the task. He'll die 1,000 mournful deaths just doing what you ask. So ask yourself a question of this gallant, noble steed. Would you do the very same for him if asked a fearful deed? Well, his choice of words cut fast and deep, just like a surgeon's knife, yet changed a kid's perspective, rearranged a life. And at his service just this morning, a tear fell when they read, he always rode good horses, and that's all that need be said. It's gentle hands that make good horses, son, not fight, nor fear, nor dread. Good men will ride good horses. That's what my daddy always said.
Oh,
Thank you.
that was really sweet. What a great tribute to your dad. That was very nice. Very nice. Well, I think,
That's what I say, the inspiration, you never know where they're gonna come from.
Uh-huh.
And so, I guess if I'm gonna say anything else, it's write those stories down.
right.
Write them down. You don't have to put them in poetry form. Just get them on paper. Write them down. I've got poems at home, a box full of poems, partial poems,
Right.
and I'll go through them every now and then, and I think, who wrote that? You know? And so just
Yeah.
write it down.
Yeah.
Come back to it if you need
Yeah.
to, but write it down. That's the main thing.
That's great advice. You know, all sorts of things that people do. They like, you know, you make a note here, or you start a sketch there, whatever it is you're trying to produce. It may not happen that fast. It may just be the inspiration, and then you come back to it at another
Right.
time to finish it out.
Right.
Well, Jay, I just want to thank you so much
Thanks for having
coming
me.
today. I hope you guys all enjoyed it as much as we did. It was very good.
Well, this
Very
is
good.
one of our favorite places to come down here to the Chisholm Trail
Yep.
Museum in Duncan.
Yep.
Great place.
Yep, we love it here too. And so speaking of that, I'm going to hold this up where everybody can see it. The name of that book you mentioned earlier,
The Trail Drivers of Texas.
Trail Drivers of Texas. If you think you might like a copy of that, you can check here on our website or call us. We'll be glad to help you out with that. Also, if you're interested in becoming a member of the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center, this is where you'll go to find out the information